A new Scottish prison service policy will mostly keep trans inmates with a history of violence against women out of female Scottish jails. But according to a new report, the inmates could still be allowed to mingle with female prisoners. The report says transgender people in custody should be provided the opportunity and supported to work towards being accommodated in an estate that aligns with their affirmed gender, so that on release to the community, they have had the opportunity to live with those who share their affirmed gender. Those trans prisoners deemed too dangerous to be given a permanent swap into the female estate could also be offered visitation rights to women's jails to allow them to mingle with female inmates. Here's another quotation. An individualised approach was also seen to offer flexibility to the management of transgender individuals in prison. While it may be necessary to accommodate transgender individuals in a prison which does not align with their affirmed gender, there may be other ways of supporting their gender identity, for example, through access to work parties, activities, or even programmes with others of their gender identity. By participating in activities and programmes in that estate while remained housing in the estate which aligns with their gender assigned at birth, where it is deemed safe to do so for the individual and for others. Now, prison leaders in Scotland have also been accused of secrecy after ruling that they will no longer confirm the number of male-bodied transgender inmates serving sentences in women's jails. The director of Keep Prisons Single Sex, Kate Coleman, joins me now. Welcome to the show, Kate. OK. There's a lot to get through here, but it sounds like the authorities in Scotland are saying that, to a degree, we need to accommodate people according to their beliefs about who they are as opposed to the biological reality of who they are. Is that a fair assessment?
I mean, I think it goes further than that, actually, if you start unpicking what's actually happening with this policy. And I think the first thing to say is that the policy document itself is extremely light on details. There's nothing of substance to it. You only uncover the reality of what's going on if you read the supplementary documentation, the Equality and Human Rights Impact Assessment and the Data Protection Impact Assessment.
So what is that reality?
It's hidden. So the reality is that at the heart of this policy is the presumption that this group of men, and I'm going to call them men because they are men, who assume a transgender identity should be facilitated as much as possible, to the highest degree as possible, to being allowed to go into the female estate. And where that will enable them to be transferred there, that is what should happen. And even for that very small number of prisoners that the Scottish Prison Service will deem to be posing an unacceptable level of risk to women in prison, that it appears that they should still be allowed to go there, you know, for day release, for activities, for programmes, pending release, in order that they can practice being women. And
can I ask,
it's just, I'm disgusted.
Have the women in these prisons been consulted about what they think about it? Because it just sounds to me like you're prioritising there, or they are prioritising the feelings of those individuals. My understanding is that a lot of the women in prisons are particularly vulnerable. A lot of them have experienced domestic abuse and violence at the hands of men. Blunt head, forced trauma to the head, all sorts of horrendous things. There's a reason why they don't want to be around men, yes?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's not rocket science.
No.
There's a reason why prisons are segregated by sex, or, you know, they're not, but there's a reason why on the face of it they are segregated by sex. It's not rocket science. We know why that is as a society, but you're quite right. Where you have the preferences, the feelings, the desires of this particular group of men, it seems that the Scottish Prison Service is willing to bend over backwards to accommodate it. So, and I think what we can contrast this with is the Ministry of Justice. They also released a revised policy back in March, and they take a very, very different perspective. They've had a very radical shift where they're now placing the safety of women right at the heart of the policy. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Will it see no men being in women's prisons? It's unlikely, but it is still a dramatic shift. So for that policy, we see that any man with any conviction for a violent or sexual offence, not just against women, cannot be accommodated in the female estate. Separately to that, and separately from any consideration of conviction, any man who has intact male genitalia cannot be accommodated in the female estate. Exceptions to that can only ever be considered if there is the very highest degree of confidence in only the very lowest level of risk to women in prison, and then it has to be signed off by the director of HMPPS, His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, and then it has to go to the minister for sign-off. So you have more restrictions, you have the safety of women at its heart, and you have that level of a personal accountability. Whereas with the Scottish Prison Service, the starting presumption is, well, no, we should be facilitating these men to go into women's prisons, and if they're not safe enough to be housed there on a permanent basis, then, you know, we should still let them access activities. And, you know, to use, as you say, vulnerable women in prison as props, as non-consensual props, in order that this group of men can practice being women, it's obscene.
I think a lot of people watching will be surprised. And, you know, whenever we cover this on the show, as we do a lot of people comment and say they had no idea this was going on.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you take the case of Adam Graham, a double rapist who decided to identify as Isla Bryson and then was housed in a female prison while they were making a risk assessment. What risk assessment do you need more than the fact that he's a man with a double conviction for rape?
Well, exactly. Exactly. It shouldn't even be a question.
So why is it happening?
Why is it happening? Well, that's an excellent question, isn't it? I mean, you know, Scotland has, you know, pardon any Scottish people in the audience, but it has pretty much gone to the dogs, hasn't it? You know,
in terms of these issues,
in terms of this issue,
a lot of Scottish people would agree with you. To be fair,
it really has gone to the dogs. I think, I mean, we know going back to when the first Scottish Prison Service policy on this was put in place in sort of 2014, in the run-up to that, there was very much a concerted effort to get this passed in prisons because, you know, as you say, you know, prisons, it's very hidden. You don't know what's going on. You know, the Isla Bryson splashed across the front page are a rarity.
Yes.
And, you know, unfortunately, most people in the general public, they don't care about prisoners and they don't care about women in prison, you know.
So that might be the problem.
Easy win. It's an easy win. And if you can make it work in a prison, then you can set that precedent and you can start rolling it out to the sectors and the services where people might care more. So schools and hospitals, nursing homes, you know, sports centres, you know, those kind of areas. You can go, oh, we've got this precedent, it works in prison. You know, the reason why it works in prison is because, you know, the reports aren't coming out. And as you quite rightly said, you know, the Scottish Prison Service has now changed their policy on data reporting and they will no longer be publishing the numbers of male prisoners held in the female estate. So we won't be able to track this. We will not know what impact this new policy has, and we will not be able to find out how many of the ones who are deemed not safe enough to be housed in the female estate are still being allowed over for, you know, work parties, you know, whatever it is that they're doing.
So what can we do about this? I mean, surely we need these authorities to record data accurately. That's clearly something that matters. Yeah,
it matters a great deal. I think at the moment, I mean, this policy is live now, but it will be fully implemented in February of next year. So, you know, we've got a 2-3 month window of opportunity to apply as much political pressure as possible to get this changed.
Yeah. Well, good luck with it. Kate Coleman, thank you so much for joining me tonight.